I did want to ask you one thing. Going through this stuff, while you're going through it, given the closeness that you ended up having with John, was it emotionally trying at times, or was it the exact opposite where it brought you joy because it brought him kind of back? You know how sometimes it makes you feel like the person's still around, right? A little bit.
Well, yes, and the reason that it would feel that way is there were months of time where I wouldn't see John. We would talk almost every day, but he was in England, I was in the States. He would be touring with the Who, I'd be touring with Leslie or whatever. But there was always that contact. So if a few days went by and he wasn't there, it was understood. I mean, it's just the way it was. But there were many times where I would walk out of the studio and I'd not even realize that I had tears running down my face and my face covered with tissues. And my wife would say something to the effect of, "Found a good track, did you?" And the thing about it, the thing that when I'm listening to these tracks, especially the live tracks, Young Man Blues, Summertime Blues, and the Tommy stuff, and Shaking All Over, I can feel my shoulders firing like I'm playing the songs, and I can feel the impulse of what it was like, and just even describing that to you now, I'm getting a chill up my back, and I'm kind of getting that goosey feeling, and I couldn't have done this 10 years ago. I just couldn't have brought myself to do it. It was too painful, and this just seemed right, and it did come with a certain amount of pain, but it came with a lot of satisfaction because I know, we did this.
And it's something that obviously you're very, very proud. It was a labor of love, obviously.
Way big love, man. I mean, big love. And John, that's the last thing he ever said to me was, "Love you, mate." And John was not that hearts and flowers kind of. He wasn't. That's not who he was. I mean, if we were drunk or something, it would turn into that sloppy romance. But I remember he was leaving for Vegas, and he was still in England, and he was getting ready to go to the airport, and he rang me up, and we talked for a few minutes. And I said, I'll be, because I was doing business for us. We were in a business partnership, so I was doing things for us while he was out, or should have been out, doing that tour in '02. And that's the last thing he said, "Love you, mate." And it was like, wow. Done.
And you got that. I mean, a lot of times people don't get that, right? So
Yeah, and especially at that time in your life, man. I mean, when you're kids, you're kids and everything's all good. But when you're in your 50s and 40s and late 40s and 50s, John was 8 years older than me, so he died at 57. So I was in my late 40s. To have that kind of a friend, that kind of a mentor, and a brother, and a partner, and just a real friend, it was a gift beyond words. It took me a lot of years to be able to come to grips with the fact that it had ended. But after a while, I was able to kind of find the poetry in that, sort of, and when I had the opportunity to do Oxhumed, it seemed like right time, right place, right time. And I don't know if you've ever seen the documentary Ox's Tale. An Ox's Tale, which is the John Entwistle story, was a documentary that I started making about John getting back together with the Who, the process of, gearing up, and what are we going to play, and what are we going to use, and wardrobe, and I thought it would be an interesting just companion piece, and they were going to let us have it in the merchandise on the Who tour, and obviously it didn't happen because we were never able to finish it. And years later, I finished it posthumously, but it was John who named it when I was editing in Burbank. And he said, "How's it going?" I said, it's going really good. I said, "Do you have a name?" And he said, "An Ox's Tale, Tale." Right? It was like, come on, how do you do that, man?
You just boom, had it.
And so unfortunately, the financing for it dried up, and we were never able to get it on that particular Who tour, which I think was 98 or 90. I don't remember what year, but and then obviously he passed in '02, and it never was completed to the point where where it was commercialized. And then years later, someone came to me and said, I heard that these tapes exist, and I'm wondering if you want to finish it. And I said, well, okay, let me think about that. And it was tough because the first person that I reached out to was Townsend. And I said, man, I'm doing this thing, blah, blah, blah. And I started it with John, and I told him the story. And he said, yeah, mate, come on over, and we'll sit and we'll talk. I hired a crew in England. I flew over to London. I met Pete at the studio. And Pete's I don't want to undercut the seriousness of Townsend. He is Pete Townsend, and he is everything that you've ever heard and more, including a very nice person, if that's the way it goes for you. But I wasn't expecting, I was expecting maybe 12, 15 minutes of, yeah, we met here and we did this and blah, blah, blah. We sat for 3.5 hours on film, just talking back and forth about John and the Who and how they did certain things. And, I asked him about my generation. I said, John told me that you always brought in your demos, they were complete demos. Did you have the bass solo on My Generation? He said, oh yeah, it was a cruddy old bass solo. He said, I just indicated where I wanted John to play, but he had planned that out on the demo. He said, I just played digga 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 blah, blah, blah. And it was just like, I don't know, I guess it was like ex-wives talking about their late husband. It was incredible. And he was just amazingly forthcoming. And yeah, 3.5 hours of just chatting up about the Who and music in general and them as kids at Acton County Grammar School. Amazing. And so then obviously Chris Squire did it. Roger didn't want to do it because he said, I'm tired of talking about John Entwistle. But there's a lot of great people in that film. And I've just been incredibly blessed with the legacy, or my portion of the legacy of John Entwistle. You can't make this stuff up, man.
And now we've got these 2 volumes to savor. What's next for you, Steve? Is there more in the treasure trove? What's next on tap?
One of the things that I did while I was, gleaning all this material is I made, I took all of the banter on stage. I remember we were doing Trick of the Light once, and we were in Reno, Nevada, and we were recording live, and he played a wrong note or whatever it was, and I just stopped the band. I said, come on, stop. And he said, what? And I said, well, we're recording, man. And he said into the mic, if we stopped a song every time I hit a wrong note, we'd be playing in effing Morse code. And it was just like, who says that kind of stuff on stage? It was just brilliant. So there was so much of that. So many funny things, and then I'd goose up the volume so you could hear what we were saying. And I have like an hour or an hour and a half's worth of just that. And I said, boy, if I could figure out a way to make a song or a recording out of this. And there's tons of stuff. There's hundreds of shows. We recorded every night for years. And there's a couple of, like I said, I have hours of his demos, things that he did. Never say never. It's got to be right. I have to be in the right place and the right frame of mind, and I have to feel like Johnny's on my shoulder saying, "Yeah, go ahead, do that." But I think he would have been very proud of what we did. Not easy to get out from underneath the shadow of the Who. That's the Who. That's one of the all-time British invasion, earth-crushing bands. How do you? And we never were competing with that. It was never about that. It was, we can do this too, so let's do this. And we did. And I think he would be most proud of the fact that we just actually went out and did that. And it was glorious, man.
Well, where should our audience go to follow y'all on various social media platforms? What do you got going on?
Well, you can always catch me on Facebook, Steve Luongo for real, or my website is just my name, SteveLuongo.com. There's always new stuff coming up there. I'm actually, my manager is booking a lecture tour for me. I put a trio together with some killer players, so I'll be out telling the stories and playing the music on a sort of a lecture type of thing at colleges and theaters and stuff. So that's out there. So look for that, but that'll be on Facebook, and I think Instagram is at Drum Crusher, and same for X or Twitter. And it's, you know, as far as the music is concerned, you can find it all on all of the streaming platforms, Spotify, Apple, iTunes. It's everywhere, not hard to find. And if you want to actually buy a physical copy, which has some really cool artwork and a lot of storytelling in there, you can get that at Amazon. And we, as far as I know, last week we're number 8 on physical sales at Amazon. So very proud of that. And Oxhumed, back when we first released it, reached number 1. And I think he would just be over the top about that. So.
Well, that's awesome, Steve. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure.
The pleasure was mine, David. Let's do it anytime you want. There's nothing I'd rather do than spill the beans on the greatest bass guitarist of all time.
Ladies and gentlemen, Steve Luongo.